Uniting all the nations, they go bop to life for patience. Cooking peace and having aprons, angelic in my cadence. These causes separation, sounding like moving blatant. Reckon God been waiting, initiating station.
Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome to the channel. This video is going to be fairly short. I just want to talk about our relationship with our Yamasi cousins. Oftentimes when looking at European scholarship and sometimes dealing with tribal people who may not know, right? Or dealing with those who may believe another way and or some who choose to mislead, right? You do have people that knowingly and willingly mislead people in order to position themselves at the top, right? So let me send this link out to a few people and then I'll begin. All right. So I'm going to be reading from this pamphlet that we have, and it's dealing with our relationship with the Yamasi. Most pamphlets that we have are 100 points, but this is a 10-point pamphlet, and it's going to explain our relationship and sometimes even the language, right? So it says the Yğaga. So now what I'll do is, now you know it's Yğaga, right? We'll use Wale for your ears, right? So that's how you know who that is. So the Yğaga did not become the Yamasi. Rather, they were among the various groups that contributed to the Yamasi Confederation. Their histories and identities became intertwined due to the shared experiences of colonization, conflict, and migration. Bless you, babies. Spanish records, particularly those from the mission system, often group various indigenous groups under a single name and admit for convenience. The go offline. Why is it always doing it? I went offline. This is crazy. It really kicked me off. We back. So the Spanish records, right, particularly those from the mission system, often group various indigenous groups under a single name for administrative convenience. The Yamasi, being more prominent in some records, became a catch-all term term that sometimes included the Yğaga. Both the Yğaga and the Yamasi faced significant disruptions due to European colonization. As the Yğaga were displaced from their coastal homelands, many joined other displaced groups, including the Yamasis, who were also fleeing pressure from European settlers. Once the Yğaga and the Yamasi began to interact more closely, particularly in Spanish Florida, they often integrated into a single community. This integration could blur the lines between the two groups in historical accounts. The Yğaga and the Yamasi both allied with the Spanish against the British and other colonial forces. These alliances, especially during conflicts like the Yamasi War of 1715, further integrated their identities and led to their joint participation in resistance efforts. Facing common enemies often necessitated the merging of smaller, distinct groups into larger, more cohesive units for survival and resistance, which might be recorded in European accounts as a single entity. Spanish and later British colonial records may have used the term Yamasi more broadly to describe various allied or confederate groups, including the Yğaga, especially when these groups lived together or fought together. The process of ethnogenesis, where new ethnic identities merge from the blending of different groups, was common in the colonial era. As the Yğaga and the Yamasi integrated, they may have formed new blended identities that combine elements of both cultures. Over time, cultural practices, languages, and identities could adopt and merge, leading to a new shared identity that historians and anthropologists might later interpret as one group becoming part of another. Historians and anthropologists interpreting the historical record, sometimes conclude that the Yğaga became a part of the Yamasi due to the significant blending of the groups. This conclusion is based on the evidence of their close interaction and their shared histories in the colonial period. It is accurate to say that the identity of the Yğaga has often been overshadowed or blanketed by the name of the Yamasi in historical records. This phenomenon occurred due to several factors related to the dynamics of colonial era Native American groups and the complexities of European documentation. Excuse me. So I want to go back and we'll talk about these things, and then I will move on to go to the misconception part. So I will go over these again. So where it says that the Yğaga or that the Wale did not become a part of the Yamasi, whether they were among the various groups lumped up or that contributed to the Yamasi Confederation. What happened is, on paper, and I'm saying this specifically to you all, when the Scots took over a certain island, right, they stopped using the name Wale or Yğaga for the simple fact that they had to write as if these people no longer existed. So they wrote about all the Wale heading down to St. Augustine. What really happened is they lumped everyone under the name Yamasi, which were their actual friends of the British, right, at that time. Us and the British, the Wale and the British didn't get along because the British was literally taking our stuff and giving it to different groups that they were considering to be Yamasi, right? Spanish records. Okay, so yeah, they often group them together, kind of like they do the Muskogee. They make them a homogenous group, right? So one big group is usually what was done. And it says that Yamasi became a catch-all term. Now, in fairness to my Yamasi cousins, Wale itself also is a catch-all term. Not everyone who was Yğaga or who was from the land of Yupa, right? Not all of them were under the rule or under towns that were ruled by Miku Wale, by the big chief, right? Or our big chief. So it says both face significant disruptions due to European colonization or colonization. That's a fact. See, the Yamasi, they first felt hands or the blows to them when the Westo and some of the Yuchi that were removed from the Southern nation began to take up arms against these different nations like the Kusa, the Yamasi, all these different groups, right, that they came down and linked with. So once we did begin to interact with each other, what you will notice is, and this is by the work, right? So we're talking about ceramics. So by the work, you really couldn't tell the difference between, or they couldn't tell the difference between what was Yamasi by work and what was Wale by work, being that Yamasi often, took on the things of the Wale, such as the workforce, right? So the pottery, the stamp pottery, charcoal pottery, sand pottery, all of that, they have their own. But when they got over here, they basically started to use ours, and that's one of the things that blurred the lines. What also blurred the lines with our Yamasi cousins is that both of us began to speak what became known as Yama, right? We also learned how to speak different Algonquin dialects, because there were Algonquin people that actually made it down, some by migration, some by force, some by invasion, to the southeast, right? And even in other places, but I'm just dealing with our relationship, right? So the common enemies that we had, the common enemy that we really united against was the Westo, or were the Westo. The issue that we had is a lot of Yamasi, they were British allies. So when you hear them say, like, okay, they were the first Coast Guards, it's like, well, for who, right? Because you couldn't have been the first Coast Guards for the Wale, being that we already had that, right? So what happened was, you have certain groups that were defending the European, right? And that started the clash. So when that clash happened, they just start calling everybody Yamasi, whether you were a European ally or not, right? So, okay, we can skip 7, because the thing about British records, right? They're going to mention who they want to mention, but there's a national register, there's a paper about parks, right? They explain that a lot of Yamasi have Wale origins, and we know that was the pen name before. So with all these people, their cultures coming together, not necessarily them genetically mixing with each other, but with the cultures coming together, they basically, in the eyes of the Europeans, became one and the same. So today you will hear certain chiefs say, well, we Yamasi were also known as the Wale. And it's like, wait, pause, explain that. Explain how your family was known as Wale when you come from the interior. The Wale aren't your direct family, right? What happened is when you came to the coast and the Wale pushed down to St. Augustine, some of you all pushed down to St. Augustine too, which makes sense that they would have the blended identities, but that wouldn't make them one and the same. Okay. Now, what we're going to read next, this is the misconception. This is called the misconception of Wale and Yamasi with Muskogee, right? And the reason I have this up is because it needs to be read. It needs to be read and understood. What's going on here definitely needs to be understood. Now, William C. Stuyvesant, right? Great man, and he definitely his work or his words definitely should be read. He establishes something in the 90s, and people are still trying to avoid, right? So it says in a recent article, Broadwell claimed to have discovered new evidence that establishes conclusively that Wale and Yamasi must be recognized as Muskogee languages. He has not done so, and I shall show that A, the forms that Broadwell cites are simply Creek, not from a language quite close to Creek, and B, there is no evidence that these forms were collected from speakers of Yamasi or Wale, and C, Yamasi and Wale remain Numna Nuda in the sense of Girard, that is, names which we have no linguistic evidence. Broadwell noticed 7 lexical items quoted in the 19th century biographical sketch of Tomochichi, a chief who dealt with the English colonists at Savannah on the coast of Georgia in the 1730s. He compared these forms with modern recordings of Creek and several other Muskogee languages and decided that they are from a language that, with Creek, forms what he calls the Northern Muskogee subgroup. Adopting the label from Monroe in 1987, and in fact also from Swanston in 1922, which we have that text, the Creek Indian books by Swanston, right? Says, although the latter put the Wale and the Yamasi in his southern division. The issue that we have here, right, is you have Europeans, um, you have Europeans trying to dictate what is what about others' cultures, and their language isn't even old enough to tell our story, right? We are older, our ancestors and our story are even older than their language. So what they hear and were comparing it to, they really had no knowledge of, right? While they were known for, we were known for speaking what was considered to be Muskogee. And it's only because we had Itza cousins, right? Mayan cousins. We had Calusa cousins, Tamukwa cousins, different groups of Taino cousins. So we learned to speak everyone's language. Why? A lot of these people were coming back home. If you understand the migration stories of those that left, then you would know, again, they were coming back home. And when they came back home, we learned their languages. This is how we were able to communicate, right? Now, this should be the icing on the cake for this conversation when dealing with the language, right? And we know that an alliance don't make you and someone one and the same. So it says, while the Yamasi language itself has only been discussed by linguists in the term of its lack of available data, documents demonstrate how frequently Yamasi spoke multiple languages, including their own Spanish, Hichiti, Coushatta, Muskogee, and Cherokee. The Yamasi spoke Native American languages of the interior rather than Appalachian, Wale, Tamukwa, and the Tamukwa languages of Spanish Florida. So what gets us is we understand when the Yamasi began speaking coastal languages, right? And we understand them speaking Cherokee has to deal with chiefs, different chiefs that say that they have Yamasi lineage, right? Or even Wale lineage. The issue that we usually had, right, is that when Europeans lumped all of these people together, it often was hard to tell who was who, right? Especially on paper. And then after you have the War of 1715, in 1717, you get laws basically saying anyone not completely Indian is deemed Negro. And how do we know what a Negro is if that's just dark skin? That's just someone who's of dark skin, right? Let me see if I can pull up this this National Registry paper. One moment. Let me see if I can put this up for y'all. Let me see if I can pull this up. Let me take a 30-second break. Let me take a 30-second break. I don't want to keep y'all waiting. So let me go ahead and play this while y'all wait.
Yeah, right. Young Red nigga. Color, alley, nigga. Color, alley, bitch. Color, alley, nigga. Color, alley, bitch. Color, alley, nigga. Color, alley, bitch. Holla, nigga. You color, alley, bitch. Color, alley, nigga. Color, alley, bitch. Color, alley, nigga. Color, alley, bitch. Color, alley, nigga. Color, alley, bitch. Holla, my nigga. You color, alley.
Everybody, let's go. Nigga, let's go. To a motherfucking place that you ain't never been to. But keep it on the low. Where you can absolutely, positively kick it on the side of the stove. Sipping on that 4-0. Nigga, fuck the 5-0 with your pit bull. Don't let them roam around, though. On the path to the loud, go ahead, you can blow. Ain't a motherfucking noose on the aisle. Already been burnt on a pile. You ain't never ever gotta worry with your motherfucker would. Put the gun to the back of the head of a child. Go wild. Welcome to the land of the colored. All we do is win, never suffer. Ain't no cops in the cover. Where every kid on the block never had a clock. And all families got a father and a mother. But we all living good, nigga. Ain't got good. He delivered us cause he could. Well, they couldn't bring crack to the hood cause it ain't no hood. Tyrone and Keisha doing pretty damn good. All the kids wearing hood.
All right. We back. So those that, if you may have joined, welcome in. So let's talk about the next step, right? Or the mix up, the mix smash, right? Give me a second. Let me scroll up for you all. This is page 2. Okay. All right. So it says the first mention of the people who later became Yamasi Indians can be found in accounts describing the earliest European expeditions into the area now occupied by the states of South Carolina and Georgia. The Ilion expedition, which attempted to settle somewhere along the South Atlantic coast in 1526, may have encountered the Indians of Wale on the coast of present-day Georgia, although there is currently some dispute concerning precisely where Ilion and his colonists landed. If the peoples of Guadeloupe or Guadeloupe, right, visited by Ilion were the Wale, then this is our first recorded reference to these people by Europeans. See, right? So, beginning in about 1660, conditions began to change. At about that time, the Westo Indians settled on the Savannah River near present-day Augusta, Georgia. The Westo moved into the area from the north with guns obtained from Virginian traders. Using these guns, the Westo began raiding neighboring groups, including the Wale, who did not have guns because the Spanish never established a trade system to dispute goods to their Indian allies. They just wanted to convert us. That's all that was about, right? By 1661, the Guale refugees had settled around the walls of St. Augustine in an effort to escape the attacks of the Westo, who the Spanish called Chichumicos. The Westo staged raids against all of their neighbors. When the English arrived in 1670 to settle their new Carolina colony, the coastal Indians of that province professed great fear of the Westo, who were thought to be cannibalistic. In reality, the Westo were taken captives not for cannibalism, but so that they could be sold as slaves in the Virginia market. In this way, the Westo were able to obtain guns and other trade goods from Virginia. Shortly after settling at Charlestown, the English sent Henry Woodward up the Savannah to treat with the Westo. Woodward was able to negotiate a peaceful alliance with the Westo, and for the next several years, they were close allies of the English. Am I sharing this? Let me share this. Okay, let me share this. I thought I was sharing it. One moment. Let me share this. Hold up, so y'all can see this. There we go. Let me let the screen jump. All right, jump. All right. So it says, where are we? These weapons were used to attack and intimidate the Westo's less well-armed neighbors. By 1675, the Westo had already begun driving the Tama from interior Georgia. This is where we are here. Spanish records indicate that by that year, there had already were a great many recently arrived Tama living among the missions of both Wale and Appalachia in western Florida. Many of these Tama refugees settled on the coastal islands located between the Wale missions and St. Augustine. In both Wale and Appalachia, these Tama refugees were referred to as Yamasis. A decade later, there were additional Tama or Yamasi refugee populations residing among the Tamukwa of northeast Florida and the lower creeks on the Chattahoochee River of the southwest Georgia. Okay. It says, although there may have been English-inspired attacks on Wale missions prior to 1680, the first full-scale assault occurred in that year. Contemporary Spanish records report that a force of Westo, Creek, and Cherokee attacked two Wale missions in 1680, although neither suffered serious damage. Three separate nations with guns couldn't handle little old, you get what I'm saying? That little old Wale. Over the next few years, the Wale missions were reportedly attacked and the mission population dwindled as increasing number of Wale refugees moved south to the Tama settlements of north of St. Augustine. By 1686, the Wale coast was totally abandoned. Refugees fled in several directions. Many sought refuge with the Yamasis, who were located just north of St. Augustine on Cumberland, Amelia, and Fort George Islands. Others fled inland to join the lower creeks, while still others settled among the Appalachians. Let's talk about this real quick. Cumberland, or what they're calling Cumberland, right? Amelia Island and Fort George, all of that was Wale territory. What happened was once the Yamasi started coming in and needed a place to settle, and while they were moving around, the English basically found the Yamasi to be valuable allies, right? Now, it says this situation did not remain static for long. However, neither the Wale nor the Tama, now called Yamasi, were satisfied with their treatment by the Spanish. As early as the fall of 1684, people described as the Yamasi began arriving in the southern frontier of Carolina. Among the first arrivals was the Tama chief, Altamaha. We're going to talk about him later, right? Who had come to Carolina from the vicinity of St. Augustine. Over the next few months, many more Yamasis, perhaps as many as 2,000, migrated to Carolina. These people included both Tama and Wale, and perhaps a few other people of other tribes. But the Carolina traders and government referred to them all as Yamasi. The name Wale does not occur in Carolina records in reference to any of these peoples, although it is certain that many of the Yamasi were of, my last pen name was Wale origins. So the Yamasis, or the people that left St. Augustine, were called Yamasis. But us Wale know that they weren't Yamasi, they were Wale. The person that they're calling the Yamasi Hashpa King is from the town of Uspu or Uspu, right? And he had a cousin. So when their nation, when the town split and one went to Carolina, the English documented the Yamasi chief of Uspu or Hashpa, because that's how they spelled it. And the Spanish said Don Francisco Antonio Cacique of Wale. So these two men are brothers, clan brothers, whose story was separated. And when the English got a hold of the documents, they technically made them one person, when in fact, they are two completely separate people, right? So, peace, everybody. What's going on? No, this is not pre-recorded. We live. We lit. We lit. Chi, peace, family. What's going on? So with that being said, right? Let's see where we are. I want to go to where it talks about, okay, so this is talking about a raid. So it says the Yamasi were settled in several towns on St. Helena Island. And we had a grandmother that comes from there, right? 1684, 1685. But they soon were requesting additional space on Hilton Head Island. Listen to this. It says in the two raid St. Augustine. So it said in the raid of St. Augustine, that's what it should be saying, right? It's surrounding Indian towns. Oh, where am I? Oh, sorry. It says in the meantime, a group of Scots, there we go. Had to move it up. A group of Scots were settled on nearby Point Royal Island, encouraged the Yamasi to raid St. Augustine. So this is where we're going. Think about it. You have people who left St. Augustine and became known as Yamasi. And then the Scottish said, do what? Hey, go ahead and go down there and get your people and put them on them boats. And that's exactly what the fuck they did. In one such raid on the Timucua mission of Santa Catalina de Afruga, in February, because it's a longer name than that. So I was thinking about, but in February 1685, the Yamasi killed 18 and took 25 slaves. The Spanish were angered by these Scottish-inspired raids, and in August 1686, they attacked and destroyed Stewart's Town and the nearby Yamasi settlements. Where are we? Let's see. Okay, here we go. It says, here we go. Residing 07, perfect. Beginning in 1702, contemporary documents contain numerous references to abuse of the Yamasis by traders residing among them. These abuses included enslavement of Yamasi and their close allies, theft of hogs, guns, and other goods by traders, destruction of Yamasi houses, encroachment on Yamasi land by stock owned by nearby settlers. So let's talk about what was really going on. You have a group of Wale and groups of Yamasi and other people that was sent down to Florida to raid territory. When they were raiding this shit and bringing people back, you got others coming back getting those people off. So now the English like, look, man, y'all ain't meeting y'all quota, so we finna get y'all's. Altamaha, right, who was an enemy to Wale, his wife was damn near beat to death. There are other chiefs whose wives and girlfriends and sisters and daughters were taken by Europeans as currency for slaves. So when that began to happen, they got mad and like, shit, y'all can't do that to us after all we did for y'all. This is why the war really popped off. And those that were enslaved still assisted them. Now here's the daggers. Let's keep it going, right? In an effort to provide the Yamasi with increased security for the greater protection of their property rights, the Carolina government established the Yamasi Reserve in July 1707. Who established this reservation? They talk about this reservation is talked about often. The Carolina government established this reserve for them in 1707. This reserve stretched from the Combahee River in the north to the Savannah River in the south, and inland to a line drawn from the head of the Combahee River to the head of the Savannah River. Islands within this area, including St. Helena, Lady, Hilton Head, and Port Royal, were excluded from the reserve. The only island that was an exception to this exclusion was Hall's Island, located on the western tip of Point Royal Sound. You know why? Because it's a buffer zone. They created these reservations to be buffer zones against the Wale coming back for their shit. So it says, at the time the reserve was established, the Yamasis consisted of about 10 towns. And in 1708, a 1708 census gives us the Yamasi population at about 500 men, indicative of a total population of about 1,500 to 2,000. They basically do 3 to 1. That's how they, you know what I'm saying? A woman, 2 children to a man, 3 to 1, right? Or a man, woman, and you know what I'm saying? A woman, 2 children to a man, 3 to 1. That's how they used to get the numbers. So another census taken in 1715 put the Yamasi population at slightly more than 1,200 men in 10 towns. It says by 1712, the various Yamasi settlements were grouped into upper and lower towns. No known document lists the towns included in these two spatially distinct groups, but information on plats and in other documents allows identification of most of the 10 towns recognized as Yamasi. So the lower towns, which are indicated on at least two plats, were led by Chief Altamaha, right? And the upper towns were led by the Potocaligo. It says the Yuha may have been a group of Wale formerly known as Yoha, right? Yoa. That's how you really would say Yoa. Yeah. So the upper towns were composed primarily of remnants of Wale, although remnants of other groups may have been incorporated to these towns. Potocaligo was the head town of the upper division, and the Potocaligo chief appears to have been able to speak for all of those residing in the upper towns. Potocaligo, Pocosabo, and Huspa were all upper towns that I believe were occupied by Wale remnants. The reason he says believe is because all of those names originate with Wale people. You can't be, or you cannot be, you cannot, and it happens today, but you cannot say, well, I'm Yamasi and my town is Potocaligo without saying that you're Wale. But then you're going to have to explain to us how you came from that interior, right? Sapella or Sapilo, upper town is Wale. All of this is Wale. However, our cousins had a claim, being that they were moved out of their own land. It was the Wale that were giving them, our cousins do have a claim, but it was us giving them this land. And with us providing them this land, a lot of people that were became known as Yamasi, right? Based off their towns, especially the upper. But those of us that stayed true, know who we are, know what was going on, can name and tell you what Wale was doing while they were being considered Yamasi by other groups. Now, I did reach I'm almost at my 40-minute mark. I did say it was going to be probably shorter than this, but any Q&A, you could, if you have any questions, you could put them in the chat, in the YouTube chat. I can see them in the YouTube chat. If they're not in the YouTube chat, I can go on Facebook and view them too. But I would prefer that they be in the YouTube chat. That way I can actually post them up. So I'm going to give it, a minute? And I'll be back to read the questions if there are any questions. If there aren't any questions, please share this video with someone that needs it. I know everyone knows someone, at least one person, that actually needs this video, because there's a lot of misinformation being put out about Wale, especially the idea that we are a Muskogee people, right? And the idea that we originate out of Mexico or out of South America, or that we come from the North, right? Like, we're here to fix all of those misconceptions. Speaking on the North, if you ever read that Wale said that all souls originate in the North, that's a lie. What was being explained is that the souls that originated in the North had to come to the South to get what they needed. This is why the Lenape deity Montezunga, right, his so-called counterpart, was there in the South, Kwezuka, right, or Kwekuka. That's really how we would have said it. If you read the story and you notice, every time when the Yamasi came, the Yamasi helped the Wale through famine. They brought maize. When the Muskogee came, when the Aztec came, when different Algonquin people came, they brought war. If you are Wale, but you calling yourself Yuchi, you have to find out why we called a specific group of people Yuchi and no longer called them Yupa, right? Or Ikwa. So all of this matters, and I'm willing to work with everyone who's true to this, I'm willing to work with everyone who understands that, yeah, we have admixture. Yeah, we have cousins that are from present day Africa that were brought here, like the Igbo and the Edo from Benin, right? Or our Mandinga cousins. We have European in our lineage, right? Or our lineages, or people that assisted us, like the so-called Moors, right? We have our Mayan cousins and our Aztec cousins, those who didn't come to war that assisted us and we assisted them. So this culture is so vast. This thing is so much to cover, but I focus on Wale being that's my direct lineage. There's no point for me to focus on the Aztecs when I know for a fact a lot of their stuff come from the Wale, right? So I can point that out without saying that, hey, we're Aztecs, right? I can talk about the Mississippian culture, knowing that Wale is what made Mississippian era, made the Mississippi beautiful. But what people call the Mississippian culture is regulated by Europeans. They literally tell you it started at this point and this point, right? But in reality, it started because of the Lenapes migration and them mixing with the Yuchi and them mixing with the Sioux, right? And them mixing with the different waves of Muskogee Creek. So said that to say, all of our people that are across the board need to view things like this. All of our people that are across the board need to actually study this for real. And once we all study it together, once those that need to do the work or those leaders of the family can sit together, then we can put our whole story together. Until then, if you're picking pieces, and y'all know my favorite saying, hell yeah.